Okay, we are in discourse number 11, truth or correctness it is called, return of the test number 1, we have it here, so I give it back to you next Wednesday, right? And you will all have A++ probably.
We hope.
We hope, yes, and then we have a second test on April 6th, from April 6th to April 13, and I think we can take the same depth study. So if you have chosen a critical theorist, Horkheimer or whatever, you can have the same one. And only the depth study, the background reading, should probably be changed. So we had two background readings. One was Siebert, the future, this is this one there. And then we had another one. No, we had only one. Okay, so that would be our last background reading. So that would be new, but you can take the same critical theorist as you had before, right? Okay, so let's start with the time diagnosis first, and then we go to the second background reading. Okay, was there anything happening in recent days which we could analyze in terms of the critical theory of society? That's what we do. We want to practice it, what that would look like. So we had, of course, Brussels, right? So that is what happened yesterday. And so let's discuss that for a moment. So first of all, we have to get the facts straight, and that is very hard, first of all. But that positivistic sociology and dialectic sociology have in common. They have to have the facts, data, and so on, right? So here we are clear. And so what do we know? We know that ISIS has done it. They recognized it. They took responsibility for it. We know that 240 people were wounded. 31 people were killed in the process. They were from different nationalities. There are Americans among the wounded, but other nationalities as well. It took place in the UN, in the European Union government. So Brussels is the capital of Europe. So those attacks have a symbolical side to them. So when they twice last year attacked Paris, Paris is the city in which the Enlightenment, the bourgeois Enlightenment, was developed. This bourgeois Enlightenment led to the bourgeois revolutions. So that is the symbol, because we know the antagonism is between a great world religion on one side, and on the other side, modernity and modern enlightenment. So they aimed at the very center of modern enlightenment. So then Brussels is the capital of the European Union. So the station, the train station, which was attacked, is right in the middle of these governmental buildings there. And then the airport is, of course, also used. So there was a bomb at the airport. The biggest bomb did not explode. So the casualties could have been much higher. Some defect, maybe a little wire or whatever, did not work out. The other bombs were full of nails. That is a very treacherous thing in terms of bombs, because the nails fly all over the place and they go into the bodies and so on. So it produces a maximum of wounds and casualties. So what else do we have about the whole thing?
That's
yes.
Primitive bomb in this case.
Well, it was not that primitive. I mean, obviously they are looking for, they found 3 men. They are looking for 3 men, and they have these little wagons. When you go to Europe, do we have enough place there?
Yeah.
When you go to Europe, you have these little wagons which you push there, and they saw these 3 guys, and they would like to catch them, and they think one of them is the bomb maker. They found weapons in his apartment and so on. So, okay, so these are little details. Is there anything else? Of course, the police force and the army and Belgium and France are on emergency laws. I think we mentioned that all bourgeois countries have emergency laws. So when we talk about fascism, then Hitler asked for these emergency laws. He was a dictator by law. There was nothing legitimate about it. So now Roosevelt did not ask for them here. He had a New Deal instead. That was a very good accomplishment that he could do that. But Franco, Salazar, and so on, they all asked for the emergency laws. The danger today with Trump as a fascist is that if he comes into, difficult situations, that he may be willing to ask for these emergency laws as well. So already to govern by executive order, as all presidents do, always reminds people that if things get worse, then that could lead to these emergency laws. That is to govern by executive orders all the way. He can send home the Congress and so on. He can concentrate all the power in the executive. And so that with Trump, the danger in the future, if he gets into the White House, would be that he would much more likely he would call for these emergency laws in case he gets opposition, in case he has another 2008 financial crisis and so on. So that is the danger why people are so frightened that he may come in. So, but nevertheless, is there anything else about the president was in Cuba and he looked at a football game, I think, and of course the right-wing media they showed the picture of the president looking at the football game, and then at the same time Brussels, the thing blowing up. So the people, want the government to protect them against all that, and of course Trump showed that the president is not doing that. So that is some kind of a outflow of this whole thing. Okay, is there anything else what we can say about this thing? In terms of analysis, we have in our course here not so much the sacred and the profane, but we have the class antagonism. So does this whole thing have something to do with the class antagonism? The so-called terrorists, that is a name, of course, which we give them, right? They are not calling themselves terrorists or whatever. So that's a perspective. In our perspectives, they are terrorists. In other people's perspectives, they are heroes, they are saints or whatever. So, but nevertheless, they come from the working class section. And that's where last week they stormed some apartments and they killed somebody. And it is possible that this attack was a revenge for it. So here we have the lex talionis, which is operative in all of this, which Judaism and Islam have in common. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, leg for leg. It goes through the whole body. So when one strikes, and they did last week, the Belgian police, they killed somebody, they caught somebody. It's possible that this was the counter movement to that, and now this will be countered again. And so there is no end of this eye for eye, tooth for tooth. And Christianity, the fourth commandment of the Sermon on the Mount, tries to overcome this. The old people said eye for eye. I tell you, be tolerant. So hold up the other cheek instead, or relax the whole situation. And Jesus, the rabbi, tried to break this curse of killing and counter killing and so on and so on, because it goes through generations sometimes. So
does this apply for Judaism also? Or this is in Christianity only?
Well, in
don't take eye for eye, what Jesus said.
Yeah, that was in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, right? First, eye for eye.
Yeah.
So it is different parts. Sometimes it's eye for eye, then leg for leg, foot for foot, and so on. So. But we have to see that this itself is nothing unethical as such. It is already progress in terms of the evolution of ethics, because it does not only say eye for eye. It means also not more than that. So you should not take 10 eyes for one eye. What Israel does against Hamas and against Gaza is very often that one eye is taken from them, rockets or whatever, and then they take 100 eyes for it.
Ron said the same, but he gave somehow between the Christian view and the one of the Jew view. It is if you punish the same as you have been punished, but if you to forgive, that would be better for you. So he encouraged them to forgive, but still you can do it.
Right. So both the rabbis and the imams would say that this teaching of Jesus is a very moral thing, and you should really do that. But if you do it in politics, if you do it in domestic politics or international politics, then it will be interpreted right away as a sign of weakness, and then it can make the situation worse than it's before. Right. So, yes, all three Abrahamic religions agree that Jesus' idea of breaking the talion is a good moral idea, but it can only be on the level of personal morality. So when you look in your roadmap there, you will see there is we have private right, and besides private right you have personal morality. So it belongs into this personal morality, but you cannot translate it right away into the state. So when you have internal state law or external state law or make history and so on, that is where it seems to be problematic. Where when you then, because in a certain sense, when you do not take the other's eye, you try to appeal to his humanity in a certain sense. You say, you are a human being, I'm a human being, we both have to die, we should not do this to each other in a certain sense. So, and everybody has this humanity or this rationality in himself. But the danger, the risk which you take is that your gesture will not motivate in him that rationality, and then he will hit you a second time, and you lose your second eye. That is another risk. So sometimes people think that's cowardice, but it needs much more courage to not to take the other eye, so than just to strike again, because it is not clear if the other's rationality will really break through, or if he will passionately, hit you. So, so nevertheless, this is definitely, operative in this type of behavior. So, in Brussels, in one side, that happened to them, so they kill again. So, but nevertheless, let's look at this antagonist. Yes.
How we could understand the Crusaders or the Middle Ages.
The Crusades?
Yeah, Crusades.
Yeah.
Through these.
No, the Crusades had nothing to do with Jesus. I mean, you have to think that Christianity, what Horkheimer would say, that Jesus died against all those who represent him. And that is true, for the Crusade alliances of Germans and British and so on, knights who went there. And so
but it was led by the church, in fact. It was
right. I mean, even by saints, like Bernard of Clairvaux was one of the main propagandists of the whole thing, right? And there were religious things. When you went there, you would go to heaven right away, and all kinds of things. Yeah.
So should we relate it to Christianity, or say no, this was a personal thing by these guys, but they are leaders?
No, it was not a personal thing, but it was certainly a thing on the level of the state and not on the level of personal morality or whatever. So we had that. We had this example. Oh yes, when somebody asked, if the Jewish religion is a peaceful religion, you cannot simply say yes or no. You can say the biblical religion, biblical Judaism, was not peaceful. Maybe today we mentioned Joshua, Joshua marched from the Jordan, to the big sea, a great sea, the Mediterranean, and they wiped out everything. All the tribes there and all the city-states, either they were annihilated or they were subjugated, and so there was nothing peaceful about it, and nothing about Moses neither. But that operates not on the level of personal morality. Jesus and Socrates are really the ones who opened up this sphere. It wasn't there before. What the Jews had before was a statutory law. So it means Moses was the creator of 12 tribes, but a state organization. So it has nothing to do with personal morality. And it's very important now for us when we have this roadmap thing. Roadmap A. There you have the whole structure of the critical theory of society. And therefore there appears personal morality, which includes things like conscience, personal well-being, guilt feelings, and so on. So that was not there always. All these subsections there in the critical, under A there, they have come about in history. So for instance, family is very archaic. Then the state is very old. There for a long time there was the family and the state, but there was no civil society. Civil society, what we have here, is relatively new historically. So the only Socrates 300 before Christ, and then Jesus himself, they then developed up this dimension of personal morality. Why? Because the state religion, the mythology of the Greeks or whatever, were declining and were disintegrating. So Socrates gave a new hold to people in civil society, and they found it inside, in the conscience, not in the mythology of the state any longer, in Zeus or Athena or whatever. There's Athena there. So the same thing, Jesus appears at the end of the Jewish state, in the last decades of the Jewish state, with Pharisaism, with the hypocrisy, the attack against the Pharisees, that what they preach, they don't hold what they preach, and they don't believe what they preach, and so. So the revolution which Jesus made was a moral revolution. Now he uses, of course, authorities still of the old religion. So he says, I teach you only what Yahweh tells me, that I'm teaching, because to make that breakthrough, he could not simply talk about his own authority or whatever. He had to teach them in the same authority which they had before.
They didn't come to do away with they didn't come to do away with the old covenant, but to
yes. Moses taught this. Now I teach this. So there's the Moses Decalogue, and there's the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount is something completely new, and Jesus tried to teach them, and even the people who were close to them, he failed totally. Because Judas, he had taught this morality, betrayed him. The other one, Peter, denied him 3 times. All the disciples run away, and so on. And that goes through the whole church history. We have here a disaster which just came up to me recently. So, on one side, the Enlighteners, now, like the French in Paris, what we just talked about, these Enlighteners attacked religion, Catholicism, and so on. That religion does not make people moral. So they are baptized, they go to confirmation, they go to confession, and so on. But then they don't act like the pagans do, but they do not act according to the Sermon on the Mount. That was the attack of the Enlighteners. That's what they called then the opium religion. Opium religion. See, that means the religion makes you feel good, but it dulls your conscience. So that means why does religion not make people moral? Because religion says, for instance, Christianity, Christ died for your sins. Your sins are forgiven. It's Easter now. They will say that again. No. So and therefore you don't have to do anything. So you killed so many people. Last week we killed 100 people with our automatic airplane there at one place by one rocket. 100 people dead. So so therefore they say you don't have to do anything. You're forgiven. Christ is your savior. Thereby they produce a situation in which nothing happens. They are always forgiven every Sunday or whatever, and then during the week they do the same thing as before. But the problem is now with the Enlightener, for instance, the categorical imperative of Kant or Appel and Habermas, our Habermas here, they develop now the categorical imperative, or they develop the other idea of the a priori of the universal communication community. So these are also very high standards now, and we find out that these high standards are also not kept. And you can see this in the Constitution. The Constitution is an Enlightenment document, and there the President, names a judge, and the Congress simply says to hell with the Constitution, and does not talk with, or some of them do now, but say we will not accept that. So, or let's see, the last time that the war was declared was 1940, and so when Japan attacked, And since that time, there were 25 wars, and all these wars were not legitimate because they were not declared by the real authority, which is the Congress. So that means enlighteners do not follow their own norms, which they have set up. Nuremberg trial, we will see the movie there. The Nuremberg trial, they set up international laws that also governments could be criminal. That's why the Nazis were hanged. And the Tokyo trial, the Tokyo people were also hanged. That was new, that was really progress in terms of international law. But we have not signed on to the war criminal trial in Den Haag now. That means it's our invention. This court in Den Haag continues Tokyo and Nuremberg. But we keep ourselves out because we say, well, we probably will commit war crimes and we will not go there. We will not let you judge about things. So that means it was certainly an Enlightenment progress, to have this new, that governments, whole governments could commit crimes. In the First World War, that wasn't the case yet. See, the King of England was not put on trial, and the losers neither. The Emperor of Prussia was not put on trial. He went into exile. So the nobility in England and Germany, that's the same nobility. The British kings come from Hanover. So they did not do this against each other. See? But then, between the two wars, that progress was made. Not only about gas, for instance, not to use it, but also the international law. After the Second World War, that was tremendous progress, and Habermas was very happy about it. They admired the United States, and now they don't admire the United States and are disappointed because we are not following our own law. But my point is that the Enlighteners have the same problem which the religious people have. They cannot make people moral. But now the problem is, we have, today we had a priest there, and he said, I'm coming late because of Easter. So now Easter. So he has reconciliation services. And so people come now, and he says, they confess maybe publicly or privately, and then he says, your sins are forgiven, Now, if you have that dilemma that the people cannot live up even to their own norms, out of this comes a guilt feeling. And what the churches now provide is the release of this guilt feeling. And then they give donations too, which makes them feel good. And then they can at least at the same time leave everything as it is. They leave the slums here, and in Flint, in Detroit, in Washington, and so on, all the slums. There are maybe 40 million people living in the slums. An unbelievable inhuman life. We were just there this morning. We went to the north side over there to a parish here. So therefore, the dilemma is now, religion doesn't make people moral. The enlighteners do not make people moral neither. So you have masses of people who have problems now inside. They have a conscience after all, except Mengele or whatever, they may not have any anymore. But people feel bad. They would like to be, everybody would like to be good. Everybody would like to be in the light, And now comes these religions, which cannot make people better, but they provide an unbelievable service now. Namely, they release those guilt feelings. See, but the trouble is that in reality nothing changes, except that their guilt feelings are released now. But the real situation remains the same, because they do not obey the Constitution better now after they had Easter than before. So, but that's just on the side. Let's go back to our contemporary issue there. We want to apply to that. So, see, you have facts and data. But whenever we have an experience, we do add to the experience something else, namely categories which we carry in us. For instance, like space and time. So there is certain things coming in, but they all happen in space and time. These are categories which we carry in ourselves, and which we continually organize things around us. Now, when that sounds kooky to you, then because the Copernican Turn was taken by Immanuel Kant, the creator of the Enlighteners. That means instead of being naive about things and think that this is all in space and time, and so he turned around and asked, it is called transcendental philosophy, he asked for the conditions in us so that we have the experience which we have. Now, every educated person today has to be beyond Kant. if you are naive realist before Kant and you think, that things are as they look or whatever, then you are not a very educated person. I say that because Trump defines education as having a vocabulary. That is not enough. It's not good enough, right? To be educated means to be beyond Kant and not before him any longer.
What does mean beyond or before?
Well, what I just said was that a turn took place. So it's called the Copernican Turn. That means it reminds us of Copernicus. Copernicus made a turn, namely by saying that the sun moves, but we move instead. The same thing Kant did in terms of epistemology. That means the categories do not come from outside there. They are not in the things themselves. We cannot know what the things are in themselves. Only what we can know are the conditions in us, in our understanding, in our categories, and so on, through which constitute the experiences which we have. So an educated person today cannot be a naive realist like the medieval people, but he knows the importance of the subject. So it was Kant, and it was Fichte and Hegel and so on, so that they made this Copernicus turn, but not in terms of space or cosmology and so on, but rather in terms of our epistemology, how we know, how do we know what we say, and how do we order it. And so cause and effect, for instance, is such a category in us. We do not really see that there is a cause and effect thing between a bird carrying that stuff up and making a nest and so on. It's a category by which we look at facts or informations and order it in a certain way. The best thing is what we see is a sequence in time, but that one thing causes the other, or that there is a probability that it will cause this and so on. That is the category which we carry in ourselves. If you don't have them, you don't see them. The categories which you don't have, you cannot see. So, for instance, if you can deprive the American population of the category of surplus value, they will not know what capitalism is. In the last stages of communism, I taught there in Dubrovnik, and there were many communists there. And I used that word surplus value. I said, what? You are still using this, Because in the meantime, that was the best way to know that this system came to its end. Because when they were in the West, when they were able to tell them not to use that word surplus value anymore, that was the end of communism. That means the self-management system which they had at that time. So therefore, it's very important. So while the workers, this morning we had something we read something, this thing that I don't have it here now, but
if you don't use it, they became like capitalists, right? They
became capitalists, yeah. That means the surplus value is the category, is the somehow the nail on which the whole thing hangs, because it says Trump for 1 year now, he is running around all over this. He hasn't worked at all, if he ever worked in his life. But he has not done anything to his company, but his income has increased and continued all the time. Since he did not work, then somebody else had to work for him. And they did not get what they worked for, and he got what he did not work for. That's the core. That is the moral rottenness of capitalism. And whatever reform you make, it will not change. You can maybe lower the surplus value and can say capitalists steal only 3% from your workers instead of 30% or whatever. But it still remains independently of the category of quantity. Qualitatively, it means it remains as rotten as it was before.
The ownership of this company is not enough to give him the reason to earn money. The owner
but he doesn't earn
the
it.
work,
that he doesn't earn it is the problem. But he doesn't work. So Ford doesn't work. It means the workers put the car together. The engineers made the plans, but he owned it.
So if I bought a house, I rented it, I get monthly income. I don't work for it, but I get on my account every month.
Well, one thing which we said today about Mahatma Gandhi was wealth without work. So there were other things there which we put up, but I mean this is the crime: wealth without work. I think I told you the story once that I have a relative, or my son Carl is a relative, and he was in my class at Western. He studied economics or business, And he said, you know, you are so critical of capitalism, and that's why we are here. We want to make, you know, $100,000. And I said, well, there's nothing wrong with making $100,000. You know, the question is where you get it from. So I said, just take $1 out of your pocket. And he did. So he showed it, and I said, where does it come from now? Did you work for it? Did your father work for it and give it to you for a gift? Or did neither your father nor work? Then the question is, who did the work? And then, you know, if you didn't work for it, your father didn't work for it, somebody worked for it and didn't get it. And you didn't work for it. That is the hellishness. That's why we have slums, and on the other side, the $1 million
I
house.
understand this example here, but what I do not understand the other examples, for like, let's say you have a building, I rented it, 10 units, I get $20,000 income from there. I don't work, I'm sleeping all the time, but I own this building, and people using my building, that's why they pay me.
The question would be where you got the money in the first place to buy the building.
Yeah, and who built the building, you know? So, I mean, you are an architect now, you know, or you are an owner, or you invest in workers. You unite capital with labor, and then the workers do the building. You don't do the building, right? So
they did the building.
They fall down from the building too. They take all the risks, you know. You think how many people fell down from the Empire State Building? So the risk of life is so.
I think well, they good paid. Let's say they good well paid. That's why price is very expensive, because labor is expensive. So they got well paid. They build me a building, and now I have the building. So I rent it and get money. So everybody's happy. They had their wages. I have my building.
Well, yeah, but the problem is the wages were only a small part of what they produced. That is what surplus value means, right? That is where the robbery comes in. So they, or when you get a job someday, you know, you produce for your master, you produce $100 on Monday, and you get 25. That's what my cleaning women do here, right? So I pay them $120. There are two, and they get $12 each of them. $24. I pay $120. You know, $96 our surplus value. Now from that he pays taxes, and he pays the car, the gasoline, and the cleaning machinery and so on. So then it goes down maybe to $50.
Surplus value in this case is the money that you worked for.
No, it's the surplus beyond that what you are paid for. So you are paid for it for a certain amount, but you produce more. It's the difference between what you produce. So they produce $120, and they get only 12, each $24.
So the 100 is
the rest is surplus value.
So the wealth
that is
produced beyond
capitalist.
cost.
So surplus value, what I should have gotten.
The Islamic law against usury, you know, has something to do with that, because you get interest without working for it.
Interest is prohibited in Islamic law.
Right. That's the same principle, right? So for Jesus too, you know. So Jesus talks about tainted money. It's not against money as such, you know, but tainted money is money for which you have not worked.
There is a rule says in Islam, there is no money for waiting. Waiting doesn't bring you money.
Right. No, I mean,
But
also.
with riba, it's not just interest in the sense of I give you $100. It's right. It's excessive profit taking.
Yeah,
is essentially what it is.
Yeah,
yeah. So in this case, ownership alone, because I can't. If the workers, the labor got the percentage there. Yeah. Let's say there is a renting company here. I talked to the manager. They told me how it works. So they rent daily, let's say 30 cars. The workers, the employees get like 12% of what they receive. So 89%, 88% goes to the owner of the company.
Yeah, right.
So if these workers got the 100% of what they produce, the owner will not get anything.
Yes,
so
because it's absolutely unnecessary.
Then he will not make a company, and they will not have a job.
No, not necessarily. We had in Yugoslavia the self-management system, right? So the hotel was in the hand of the workers. They hired a CEO. They didn't need any capitalistic damage owner. What for? The same thing with the airlines. Everything, you know. Now we are back again. We go to this hotel. Now the owner, the fascists, came back, you know, the grandchildren or whatever, took the whole thing again, took it away from the workers, took the banks away from the workers. We had a counter-revolution. And now I'm not even allowed to say that was a counter-revolution. A counter-revolution is if somebody undoes the revolution which has been made, and Tito this revolution.
Where was that?
Yugoslavia. It was the Yugoslav system. So, okay, I mean, you can go, through the whole thing and every detail, but you have to hang on to the principle. The principle which goes through the whole thing and which has innumerable variations, And so when you don't have to say this is wrong with capitalism, this is wrong with capitalism. You just take the principle and then you see how the principle is at work everywhere.
Okay.
And let's take it historically for a moment again. 10,000 years ago, private property was invented, right? So there wasn't private property before. The hunters, the fishermen, the food pickers, they were all communists. So they shared their means of production together, their tools, whatever they had. But then, with that introduction of private property, hell broke loose. See, it started with agriculture. So this field is mine, and you are excluded from this. The wall building, starts out. This over there, and that is us. And then come the little city-states all over Canaan, which the general there destroyed and so on. So, and then the city-states. And then in the city-states, suddenly civil society, our civil society, our type here. And that destroyed slowly the city-states. So Plato was an attempt to rescue the Greek state, the Greek city-state, from civil society. Because civil society is liberal. It is atomistic, everybody for himself. The lawyers are the sophists who turn right into wrong into right, and so on, to defend their guys. So, and then the class comes up, the one and the many, the few and the many, but not all are free, but only a few are free, and that's our situation here. Or only one is free, like in Africa and so on. So the core, the principle which has these variations is private property. That's why Marx thinks that private property is the original sin.
Why we don't say that it's very nice model to have people leave their own property, okay? But same time, if somebody owns something, he has private property, he has the right to invest it, but he has to give fair wages. And if people are willing to work for that...
But there are no fair wages. As soon as you have a wage, that means you say, I pay you $20 an hour or whatever, but he produces $100 an hour. Otherwise, you would not hire him. You're not hired because of your beautiful face or whatever.
He's happy with that.
Huh?
He's happy with that. He's happy with what...
But he's stupid, yeah. That means he does not have the category of surplus value. He's stupid. Yes. Yes.
How I can get the money if I give him 100%? So there is nothing advantage that I can have it. So if I buy the tool for work, for example, the company car, I buy the car. So I want part of the money go to the price for the car, and I want some of the money go for me because it's my company. The difference that is not fair the percentage, but I cannot give the worker 100%. If I give him 100%, so I earn nothing. So
well, you are not owner. So instead of saying I all the time, you say we. So we,
So how we come if I give them 100%?
No. See,
no.
I think that the problem is right there is when you say when I give them 100%.
Yeah.
So for instance, just as an example, right now there's a new brewery opening up in Grand Rapids. There are no private owners, none whatsoever. All the people who work there own it. In that sense,
right.
The workers own it.
Yeah.
Therefore, they decide what their wages are. They decide how much of money that they make goes back into the business. None of the money that they generate ever leaves the business and goes to some private person who doesn't work. Yeah. It only stays in with the workers. So, that sense, when we take that model, the one thing in business that is superfluous, that is not needed, is a private owner. That's the one, because the owner, you can say if it's your business, you can't have your business without workers. But workers can have a business without the owner.
Exactly. So, and that they had this all over Yugoslavia until it was...
all owners, but the percentage is different. So when I create this company, for example, I paid 50%, so the percentage will come more than workers. So I don't say that workers, they're all with me in the company, but the percentage is different between the one and one.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, in that sense, the model that I was talking about, they democratically decide, as all
Yeah.
having equal votes and things like that, how it's going to be divvied up
Yeah.
in that sense. So if you work there 10 years, this comes to new worker, maybe they make a little bit less, whatever. But there is no like skyrocket difference between what the CEO makes and what the average worker makes or anything like that. So it's all democratically decided.
Right.
So in that sense. So I mean, think about it. Even in the life of the Prophet, even when he was a businessman, you know, he bought, he sold, but he never did riba, beyond interest, excessive profit taking. He only took out of it what he needed to survive,
Yeah.
not to get bigger and bigger,
Right,
bigger,
right,
bigger,
right.
bigger, bigger.
Let
While other
me-
people
Okay, but let's say about the surplus value. So when you have this type of a model there, then the workers are working and they get a salary. But the surplus value also goes to the workers
Right.
because they produce both. They produce their salary and they produce the surplus value. In capitalism, the surplus value goes to the guy who does that work. That is the difference. See, so, okay. But the question is right away, does that work? And when you say it doesn't work, then you say people are not moral enough to do this. And you have that in the New Testament. There you have the communistic communities in Jerusalem, and they say, you know, we everybody according to his ability. You own a house, that's your ability. To everybody according to his need, you know. But right away you have two guys there, a man and a woman, who sell their stuff. Then they go to Peter and say, we have sold it all and here is the money. But they kept something back. So that means they become dishonest. And the husband comes in, and then Peter is upset and says, you know, you lied to me, and so on. He gets a heart attack, and they carry him out. Then comes his wife, and he asks her too, and says, yes, this is all what we got for the house. Here, I give you the whole thing. And she lied again. And then they say, you know, and those who carried your husband out will carry you out too. And she gets a heart attack as well. So that's a nasty type of a story. But what it shows to enlighteners for the bourgeois type is, see, this is too high. The standard is too high. People are not that moral. And here we have the problem with which we started out, right? So on one side, they criticize the religious people for not being moral. But then when you have in Russia, for instance, you have communism, and then in this communism you suddenly have corruption. Suddenly you have, and you see what you say and say, well, it's too ideal, you know. People are not, they cannot live up to that. From everybody to according to his ability, to everybody according to his need, and so on. Because those who are able, you know, want to have more and more, and then those who have needs do not even have toilet paper. That's why we collect toilet paper every Sunday. Again, on Sunday we'll have 1,000 pieces of toilet paper and take it to the north side and so on. So, but you see, the thing is what I mentioned before is this morality thing. That means in the long march of the human species from the chimpanzee to the realm of freedom, in between, the morality would have to be lifted. As we do it, you know, when we say eye for eye, tooth for tooth, and then say golden rule. See, that is an evolution in morality. But the question is again, who will do it? You know, are we able to do it?
Yeah.
And then when you say, when you are critical and you say, look, you have this wonderful constitution, but you don't live up to it, then they say, don't be judgmental, don't be judgmental, and do you do it? And there's an unbelievable discussion back and forth. So the question is, you know, can religion make people moral, or is it opium religion? That is a decisive question, you know. So, and I gave you this example. There 4 million men marched into Russia. They were all baptized. They were all through that ritual of baptism and communion and confirmation and so on and so on. And then they go there and murder all over the place. They take even army chaplains with them who give them blessings as they murder and forgive their sins as they murder. And next week they go to the next Russian village and murder the Jews on top of it. Jews are only the footnotes.
Okay. Now I have a picture. Let me express
You have a
it
vision.
good. And
Right.
so I feel now communism cannot exist without dictatorship, without fascism, because this is what they do all the time, that they tell you, that's not enough for you. I'm telling you it's enough for me. I say, no, it's not enough for you. Exactly as a woman wearing hijab, headscarf, and says, I'm happy with that. No, you are crazy. They put this thing on your head telling you that's fine. It's not fine. But I'm fine. No, it's not. So it's kind of dictatorship, the same. Workers say, we are fine with these wages. I say, no, you're stupid. That's too little. And on one side, we're talking about these stingy and love for money of these capitalist guys, but on the other side there is the greed of these guys who want to have more and more. Why they don't just be happy with that what they have, which is very enough for them to have to lead a very good happy life? You know this. So from one side you cannot apply this communism without being dictator to force people to accept your point of view. And second thing, you have to be also greed and look at the money of other people, not only having enough, and so no, you have to have a big corporation.
But you know, all this,
you're stupid.
Yeah.
That's not enough. Even you're telling you.
Okay,
enough.
but I mean, this is all bourgeois apologetics, you know.
Okay.
So I mean, now the dictatorship, wherever you want to start with this, is the bourgeois argument.
To know the answer of that, how it answers.
No. I mean,
no,
the answer is first of all that there are workers who are greedy. That they all want to be, you know, rich like Trump. You know, they follow Trump because they think they can become Trump. I mean, there is a lumpen proletariat. You know what that was called. Of course, Marx was not idealizing workers or whatever. He knew that they were very immoral people, and how can it be moral in the slums down there? See, there cannot be. Food is first, and then comes morality and so on. So there's no idealization. So the question is now, how do you get them from the way they have become under capitalism when they be thrown into the slums? So how do you make human beings out of them? And so the question was then, you know, that you replace the present dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, because it's no labor party. This is not a labor government here. That's a bourgeois government. That means the bourgeoisie has the power of the state. And with that power of the state, it keeps those slums there organized, you know, that they don't riot or whatever. So therefore, the question is now that the state power is taken out of the hands of the bourgeoisie and is taken in the hands of the majority, which is 250 million people. So that's not communism. That is still a socialistic stage in this direction. So the question is then, when you don't need the state, when the proletariat doesn't need the state anymore, because the bourgeoisie has now lost its power. So you don't need state power anymore. And the state becomes an association of free citizens who, in discourse with each other, decide what their interests are and so on. And on the way there, you could have, you know, the decline of the labor hour. So as they do in Europe, you know, so you don't have to work 30 hours a week, or you work now 14 hours a week. And like they do in the kibbutzim, you know, you do less work. And then the realm of freedom, that means where you can develop your own energies, your seeing, your hearing, your stupidity, that is overcome because you can study now and you can do music and whatever. So that slowly, you know, in this spot. But the question is now that you will argue, you know, that people are not moral enough and that you can never make them moral, that they will always be egoistic, that they will be always greedy creatures and so on, you know. And that is this moral pessimism for which there is enough proof, you know, in history, because we mentioned, you know, that all these world religions are not able to make people more moral. You know, if you think of the morality of these people in Brussels there, you know, when you three guys march there with a big bomb there and then kill all these people, you know, that is after 1400 years of Islam and education. And the same thing is with Christianity, and the same thing is with Judaism.
As Islam has the power, there was real peace and there was no massing killing this way. Since Muslims, in fact, have been don't say the power, but since they are not anymore in the scene, these other powers, they really don't care much about human soul. This is the problem. So what's happening process has nothing to do with Islam. These people have problems feeling these our enemies, they are fighting against us, so let's do something in return. But
yeah,
so
it's
a
revenge,
different crisis that it's not.
Yeah. Okay, but I mean, it's, you know, with communism, so there is an idea that there are stages in which the communist society is developed, in which then from everybody according to his ability to everybody according to his need. So and let's take the communist thing, kibbutzim in Israel. So I was in one who produced windows. They could produce 1,200 windows a week, but they said, 600 windows a week is okay. We have enough food, we have enough clothing, and so on. So the other time we use them for dancing, we use for photography, for painting, for cultural things which make us better human beings or so. So it works, Only the kibbutzim have gone down to 200,000 people. The Zionists wanted to have a whole kibbutzim state.
Where is that?
Israel. The kibbutzim state, and it hasn't worked because Tel Aviv became a big capitalistic center, right? So.
Well, isn't that what they operated on? What Weber called traditional economics, as opposed to capitalist economics, which capitalist economics.
You mean the Zionists?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in the kibbutzim, in the sense that capitalist economics, one of the goals was profit, reinvestment, reinvestment. Whereas traditional economics was to produce the necessary material conditions for your existence.
For your needs, right?
For the needs.
So the needs, the civil society, you have it again on the A there on your roadmap, need system, administration of justice, police, and so on. So the need system is the basis. Capitalism in a certain sense turns it around. When my son says, this is a $6 billion corporation, so to hell, I'm not interested. I'm interested which needs they fulfill. And then my son says, if I would think that way, I wouldn't be a businessman. What is a businessman? A businessman is somebody who produces toilet paper. That's all. But what they made out of him is a hypostasis, of some kind of a religion. I told him yesterday, I said, capitalism is your religion. Yes, he said, that's my religion. It becomes a religion. The businessman is elevated, is apostatized, and so suddenly the university becomes a business, the church becomes a business, the synagogue becomes a business, That is the hellish thing which is happening now.
Okay, let me criticize this.
Hajj is a business. Hajj is a big business.
Yeah. All the hotels they go there, right? Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
So we are this class of the critical theory. So when some people, some city, wherever, doesn't matter, say, look, we will not work for 15 hours is enough for us, and let's dance in the rest of the time. This is very selfish, very immoral. Why? Because they have just neighbor beside them. They have no food to eat, no water to drink. If they work 20 hours, you could feed them. But they took their houses, they took their land, and let them starve and die out of hunger, and kill them, bomb them every day, and say, let's work 15 hours and dance in the rest.
We work 40, 50, 60 hours and I still
When
don't.
they could go, we work 15 hours, we don't work 20, we have 5 extra hours, we can give those hours to those people and give them jobs. They can take the extra hours that if we work 20 hours. No, we can hire some new people in there. They can join us in dancing at 15 hours.
For example, whatever, they just think, if I just think about myself, as the Prophet said, whoever sleeps in the night and his neighbor is hungry is not a Muslim.
Right.
So how I can be happy and think about myself? They are human beings, even if
But listen, the point is now from everybody according to everybody, according to his need and so on. So the fundamental is that the needs of all people are fulfilled. It's not the case under capitalism, right? You have 40 million people still today who have no health insurance. You have so many people are unemployed and so on. So the question is where in thought now, where we started out with this category which you have to have, So if you can go all over the place, and see all kinds of contradictions because it's a messy type of a thing. So where to start, Private property, that is what ruined it all in a certain sense. But not only that, it also produced a lot of things, that is another thing. So there can be things which do something very bad and do something at the same time it's right, So when we think in the terms of the critical theory, slaveholder society, feudal society, capitalist society, socialistic society, one cannot say that the slaveholder system did not have anything good or whatever. They were good slaveholders. They were house slaves who were different from the field slaves. The house slaves were almost family. They're the nanny and so on and so on. But you see, the principle is
work and they give the service value.
Yeah, okay, we're surplus value. Very good. Now you got the categories out. Very good. But see, the surplus value, it looks as if the slave worked all day long for his worker.
And master
So
sleeps.
that means all what he does is surplus value, and he gets no wage whatsoever. But that's not true, because he gets food, he gets the clothing, he gets his cave or a house or whatever. So, see, it's not visible, the whole thing.
Not enough.
But visible is under feudalism, it becomes visible now. Because the feudal lord wants to have 4 days labor from his serfs, and 2 or 3 days are for the serf, and he can work in his own field around his little house, and so on and so on. So there you know exactly, you know, how many hours go to the serf, and how many hours go to his lord. Now when you have the free worker of the day, you think, you know, that he only works for himself or whatever. But this is not true, of course. The general modus worker, when I taught them there, found out that the workers work for their own salary only 1 day a week. Everything else goes to the owners.
From the month, 1 out of 30 days.
Yeah, right. 1 day of the week is for the salary, and the rest is all surplus value. So therefore, you know, in some systems it is clear, in some it is not so clear, and so on. But all 3 systems are, of course, immoral. Because there is a non-working group, small group, which lives from the work of the others without doing anything. Sometimes they say,
Slaveholders.
well, but they are not all slaves, because the serf has it a little bit better than the slave, you know. I mean, they could sell the family, and so on. The serf, it was not so easy anymore. But the serf, you know, the master slept with the wife of his farmer in the wedding night, you know. So all these people were all his sons then in the village and so on.
Where was that?
The lex prima noctis, the feudal lords.
Oh,
Yeah. So, but then, you know, with the bourgeoisie, that is removed, you know, the free worker. But still, the owner, the sons of the owner of a French factory slept with the girls in the factory there and so on. So it takes another form. But up to 1918, the first night right was still valid in Vienna in 1918, in the suburbs, where priests were fired because he fought against it. So we have these systems of domination,
What was that?
systems of
Lex prima
lex
noctis.
prima noctis.
What you
That is the law of the first night.
So the feudal
the
lord,
feudal lord-
anytime a peasant gets married, a peasant girl gets married.
He would sleep with the wife in the first night.
Right, the first
slave,
night.
slave.
No, not slave, serf.
His
Serf, yeah. Don't mix up the things because they are different.
1918, you said?
1918, yeah. 1918 in Vienna.
Slave-
So it reaches right, you know,
Prima
into
noctis.
the end of the Ottoman Empire. No, it reaches right into our
But
present, so to
this
speak.
wasn't in the Ottoman Empire. For sure.
By the end of it. When was the end of the Ottoman Empire?
Because this can't be practiced.
This is an Ottoman Empire, no.
No. No, it's just at the same time. The Ottoman Empire dissolved. Okay, so now let's go back to our thing which we wanted to look at puzzles there. We want to look at it in terms of the class structure, class antagonism. We could look at it, the religious thing, you know, what their religions are and so on, but this is society. We are not concerned primarily with religion here, but it comes in all the time, obviously. So, but now the people who did this, something they know is that they come out of the working class area of Brussels. It's not the bourgeois part of it, but the working class part. The same thing was in Paris and so on. So there is some social thing in it. When you look at Hamas, you know, or Hezbollah or whatever, they are not only political organizations, they're not only military organizations, they're also social organizations, you know. So when the Israelis bomb them to pieces, you know, then they get money from somewhere and help people, you know, to build their houses again and so on. So there is a social component in this whole thing. There may be a socialistic component in this whole thing, like we had in Israel, you know, with the kibbutzim. So therefore, I think that the class factor plays an important role. This is Paris is the center of the bourgeois revolution. This is the bourgeois constitution which we have here. That means they said freedom, equality, and so on. But for the bourgeoisie, certainly not for the clergy, they guillotined them. Certainly not for the nobility, they were guillotined. But they included the fourth estate. That is the whole problem. I think one aspect of Brussels and all these things is the social aspect. That means it's an anti-bourgeois aspect, because it was bourgeois colonialism, it was bourgeois imperialism, you know, in the 19th century and so on. So therefore, the first attack was against the Russians in Afghanistan. That was the second modernity, second move of modernity. Now they attack the first stage of modernity. That's the bourgeois modernity. And we have that problem here. We have a bourgeois government. We have a bourgeois president. We have only two bourgeois parties. We have no working party. Nothing.
So the attack on Russians in Afghanistan was against bourgeois as well?
No. It was not bourgeois. See, it was socialistic at that time. It was communist. It was the Soviet Union. So what Bin Laden, thought was that he had brought down Bolshevism in Afghanistan. He fought in Afghanistan. It was paid by us to fight against the others, the second thing. So, but we have to see why the second thing was necessary at all. It was necessary because the bourgeois enlightenment and revolution from the very beginning was exclusive. That means they exclude the working people, the commune. And so you have right away a commune revolution in 1831, commune revolution in 1870, commune revolution in 1917 in Munich and in Hamburg and in Petersburg and in Moscow and so on. And then it goes to Peking, and then it goes to North Korea, and so on. And it goes on and on and on.
So I don't understand why you would make difference between colonialism if it is in Europe or it is made by Europe or by Russia. Russia took swallowed Afghanistan exactly as Europe did in Africa or wherever else. So why this bad thing is not equal like a bad thing?
Well, I mean, a bad thing would, yes. I mean,
other people and
okay, so why does the bourgeoisie, why does capitalism need colonies? They need it because they need cheaper and cheaper labor and cheaper resources and so on. So that is why the British went to Saudi Arabia, That is why the French went into the other places in the Near East and in Africa. So the Germans came late, the Italians came late, and that they came late is why they became fascists, So if they thought they were left out, and that is why the plan was then to colonize Russia. That was Hitler's plan of Barbarossa and so on. So you have to see what the bourgeoisie did. Now the question is, when they now helped Cuba, did they make Cuba into a colony?
So
I don't think that we can say that.
They didn't do that in Afghanistan either.
As Cuba was under Batista, it was our colony. All the South America is an American colony, So therefore, now the question is, what did they do with Cuba? What was with Cuba, Or where else did they colonize,
I agree with that. But this is not. There is two different things. There is the point of view of those who who are colonizing others. Their background either is bourgeois, want to take resources of others, or to help others. This is the point of view of the one who colonize others. Second thing is the point of view of these nations that being colonized.
Yeah.
In all cases, they hate those who are taking their land. I don't want to know why he's coming to take my land.
Right.
So either he's bourgeois or he's socialist. I don't know. This my land.
I think we still have to, we have to differentiate between slaves and feudal lords and bourgeoisie, and so we cannot mix it up. See, there are tendencies to say, this behavior of the capitalists is really feudal or whatever. But that darkens the waters. So one has to be analytically very clear between the systems. So now I do not want to defend now what the Soviet Union does, but we have to see when the Soviet Union went into Siberia, that was their territory after all. It belonged to Russia anyway. So they built, hundreds of cities with atomic energy and so on. They had numbers. They didn't even have names, understand. So, but that was colonization, but it was an internal colonization. They colonized their own territory. So we have to see what we mean historically. All these concepts are historical. So what we mean is colonization. For instance, in terms of Habermas, he talks about the colonization of the life world by the economic and the political subsystem. And then we have social movements, like civil rights movement and so on, which pushes against this colonization. So there's an inner colonization. So we know now what colonization the bourgeoisie does and why they do it. They exhaust their own population, and though they need, as they grow and the profit rate grows, they need to go out and get other people's labor. If they get it voluntarily, then it's okay. If they don't, then they will send the CIA, and then they send the Marines, and then they have a governmental change, regime change, and so on. So that is how it's done. That we know. Now, what does the socialist do, or what did Stalin do? Which country did he colonize? You know. So the same thing is with war. The First and Second World War was a bourgeois war. These were bourgeois wars. So where's the socialistic war? They were attacked, and then they struck against it and went into Central Europe.
Russia was participated in Second World War. Russia, Soviet Union participated in Second
It was what?
Participated in Second World War against.
Yeah, right. But yes, but I mean the war came. You could from here we would say that it was the kings or whatever after Sarajevo, the assassination and so on and so on. But I mean, what was the driving force? You know, was the German bourgeoisie and the British bourgeoisie and so on. The feudal lords, you know, were not really.
Let me imagine how an Afghan man would think and would tell him, hey man, you had the Soviet people coming to your country, you fought against them. Then you had the Americans coming, you fought against them. Why did you do that? He said, look, the first guys, Soviet guys, they came to spread poverty as they have the poverty there. They came with KGB. We had no rights. We want a free land. We want our land to rule it ourselves. That's why we fought against them. Okay, then why we fought against Americans? Well, they also want to colonize our land, whatever the reasons they have. But this is our land. We will not let any foreigners come. Right? These Afghani, they have a long history of fighting against anybody coming.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But I think one of the big differences is, and what you seem to be getting to, is the purpose for colonization, in the sense that when you look at where the bourgeois nations go, they go there specifically to, for the cheap labor, the resources, access to markets, all the rest of that stuff. We have to remember that the Soviet Union was invited in to Afghanistan by the socialists.
By corrupted
No doubt, no doubt. People. But they still were invited in. So they weren't
like they do
invaded.
in Syria now. They invite by Assad to come, and people of Syria say, we don't want you.
Sure.
So it's always
But
point being,
the Russians, from their perspective, from their philosophy, they weren't there to absorb the land. They've got plenty of land, it's the largest country in the world. They weren't there for the markets. They weren't there for the cheap labor. What were they there for? In that case, to prop up a government, right? Yeah. Now, who brought them in? That was the Americans. Why? Because Afghanistan was a socialist, left-leaning government, part of the non-aligned group of countries with Yugoslavia. And we, the Americans, said we don't want that interest in that part of the world to be aligned with the Russians. Therefore, we, the Americans, I put myself in that, that's when we sponsored the drug lords, the warlords. We gave them to constantly attack the government. And that's when that corrupt government, yes, invited the Russians in. And that's where we, from Americans, we said we are going to give the Soviet Union a Vietnam, just like they gave us a Vietnam. So it was, again, the bourgeois states playing games in the Muslim world to antagonize the Russians and bring them in to start a war.
I agree that there was war there.
Let's be dialectical now in both ways, because first of all, the colonization, you could say, was not entirely bad. For instance, you were colonized by the British. Do you think it was all negative?
We have been
You too.
More than anyone else.
But was it all?
They went there. It was desert, very hot. They ran away.
We melted.
Yeah, but I mean, for instance, in some, we have sometimes students who come from former British territory, and the English is beautiful,
1882 until 1959.
1950. Yeah. With not
72 years.
Okay, but what I want to say is, colonization is a bad thing, But like it is with slaveholders and feudal lords, there are also good aspects of it. It's the negative, which pushes beyond it. That is for clear. But while the negative is there are also some positive things, which come out of it. I mean, I have not been there, so I don't know if there is anything positive. But the other thing is dialectics with the Soviet Union or whatever. The critical theory is ideology critique. So when they say we have been called in, we know that we have been called in, that Hitler has been called in, they all are called in.
Exactly.
So therefore the question, but you see now one has to see, it could be or it could not be. For instance, I visited Tito. And Tito had a group which was called the Praxis Group, which was the same thing like the critical theory in Frankfurt. There was something like that in Hungary too. So they wanted to have the whole system to be self-managed and not to have a political level up there who were governing into the yacht, the airline, and the hotels and coordinating it and so on. And then Tito said, when we talked with him, he said, because he did not allow the professors of praxis to come to my group there, so he didn't want the students and the professors to come together because he thought they would make the students rebellious or whatever. So we asked him, and he said, it is too early for this. The universities are unstable, and it could lead to a catastrophe and so on. Now, was that a true statement, or was it an ideological statement? Did he make that statement just in order to preserve his power, and the power of his politicians, or was he right about that it was too early? See? So it has to be found out in every case if something is ideology or if it is true. And that is true for the bourgeoisie, that is true for the socialists or for the fascists and so on, I would not even say that all what the fascists are doing is ideology. As a matter of fact, that Trump, says sometimes unbelievably true sentences. There's no doubt about it, The fear which the Germans have now with Hitler's book coming out again, is that there may be some truth in it. As a matter of fact, I could prove that on every page there's some truth in it. That means some truth which is unbelievably uncomfortable for the appearances which the present society, for instance, builds up, why people, the authoritarian personalities, like Trump so much is that he does not have any respect for the taboos which society sets up. So society says, this Russian guy, he kills businessmen. I don't know anything about killing businessmen. Never heard of it. So they build up this propaganda shit, and then he just stabs through it, It has a tremendous joy in it, and so does everybody else. So that this truth and untruth thing, they are connected with each other, and one has to go through the hard work now. What did really happen in Afghanistan, where they called in, is that a serious argument? And I never knew, with Tito, was it a serious argument or not. For instance, what would you do? Yeah, we told him that why not? There were 1 million Yugoslavs working in Germany, and they had a good income. So why should they not send the money home to their family, and then the family could open up a little store, or a little restaurant, or a little car factory, or taxi company, or what, And he said, when you start out with the low bourgeoisie, soon there will be a middle bourgeoisie, and then you have all the hell which you have in America now. Now, is that ideology, or is it the truth, right?
That's the fear in Cuba right now.
Yeah, right. Yes. So we go in there now, we say, we have this embargo. The embargo is still there, by the way, the Congress has not dissolved it yet. So, but it's unbelievably dangerous what happens there now. See, Castro did not come to the airport. That is by diplomatic standards, that's not a very good thing, He should really have come to the airport. But obviously a gesture, that the states will not go back to Batista. They will not go back. The president's visit cannot be understood as a counter-revolutionary visit. Now the banks come in, and with the banks come in the low bourgeoisie, And with the low bourgeoisie, who knows when Batista will return? And he was rotten. No American has any doubt that Batista was rotten. But it was our rotten character who was there. And we have these rotten characters everywhere in order to make the cheap labor and cheap resources thing possible for us to get that. That's why we need all these crooks everywhere. So, but it was, so nobody in propaganda here in the States thought that Batista was a moral person. Everybody knows he was a horrible crook. But then, he was thrown out, and the nationalization of American business and so on, and no payments for it. And so now, for instance, the island, where the prison is on, that belongs to Cuba. They stole it. They have to give it back now. But as long as the prisoners are there, we cannot get it. We could give it back with the prisoners. I wouldn't have.
They might put them on a boat, send them to Miami.
We should send a letter to the president. That's a glorious idea. That we had a seminar.
Give them back.
Please, give the whole island back with 150 people. then they maybe have a trial, or maybe they will become farmers in Cuba. Yes.
And now, I think compare now a couple of examples of bourgeois.
Yeah.
Yeah,
just keep it, cut, really.
Okay.
These are really different.
Okay.
Right?
So on the one side, the examples of bourgeois
Colonialism?
Yeah, colonialism,
Mhm.
and the communist colonialism. In fact, in each case where the bourgeois this is what you just
Colonialism?
colonialism, they had so many good sides. Like just see Germany, West Germany. In 20 years, it was a very beautiful place to live. East Germany was the hell. The same thing in 6 states in Russia, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, or Kazakhstan, these Muslim states. They had really suffered. They killed millions of them.
Okay.
They suffered a lot. So in each case, you found this communism taking the country. The people suffer.
Well, I mean that's first of all that's bourgeois ideology now. Okay. Now I was not in these other countries, but I was in East Germany. I mean it was the German Democratic Republic. It was not held at all. As a matter of fact, people lived.
People
they
were poor. They had
no. I
they
mean
never saw bananas. I saw people.
No. But this is the bourgeois view now. I mean there was no bourgeoisie anymore, or the bourgeoisie was not in the dominant position anymore. So the bourgeoisie did not do very well. So we had a friend here, a professor there from Rostock, and he was here, and he was a bourgeois, through and through. I mean, his whole personality was bourgeois, ego-centered, private, and all this, and a good guy, a good friend of mine, if he's still alive. So nevertheless, he didn't under socialism. They let him be the dean. He was the dean of the theological faculty. They let him travel, but they didn't let his sons become anything. So, I mean, that's what he had to suffer. The sons had to take a trade. They could not go into the university and so on. So the bourgeoisie really suffered. So you have to differentiate who suffered. But as far as the youth was concerned, they had wonderful youth organizations. When they went to West Germany, the German Democratic Republic, then they went back again because they were lonely. There was no friendship in the western part. Then the western part did not think about improvement of society and so on. So they went back. But now after the annexation, that there was the order that the German Democratic Republic, in case of a reunion, there should be a national assembly and a new constitution should be made. Instead of that, they simply annexed it under Gorbachev. So they said, the moment is ripe now, let's take this. So they stole it all. That means they took all the professorships and replaced them, including my friend, by West Germans. They bought up the Danish and so on, bought up all the big farms with the big cows, 10,000 of cows and so on, slaughtered them all and left them there because they killed the competition and so on. What was horrendous was the annexation, not what they had.
That's true. I lived in Rostock, by the way, and
Right.
people told me that DDR or the East Germany was, in fact, they suffered under Stasi, or this was the name of the secret police.
Secret
right?
service, yeah.
All the time, and they had really no work, no money, no thing.
Yeah.
That's why they have been so happy when the Mauer.
Well, I mean, I taught at this university, and I saw the students who come in, and it was free. It was free. Now, this fellow suffered, but when the annexation took place, that professor, who was such a bourgeois character, and his whole ancestors were judges, they were all professors, they were all Protestant. And so an honors group was set up, and now he was charged that he had gone to the Stasi and gave them reports. So when he traveled to America to visit Protestant groups, churches, he had to write 5 reports, or same report 5 times. So one given to the university, one went to the Stasi, one went to the government in Frankfurt, and so on. And so they found all that because the Stasi didn't burn anything. They left it all when the annexation came.
It was locked.
It was out there. So they found that, and so they deprived him of his job because he had cooperated as a dean. He had cooperated with the socialistic government and so on. So I mean the cruelty, of the whole thing. One could have the good things which they produced, solidarity, for instance. I mean, for instance, the youth movement in the whole country they did the following experiment. They put a stone in the back of their rucksack there, and then they all marched up to the Ostsee, to the Baltic Sea there, and they built, something in the water there. Well, they put all their stones up there, so the whole country had participated in this beautiful project, which produced, a certain spirit of being together, togetherness, and so on. Now, but how as fast that can be changed, I had one of them here. I brought him here from Rostock. And so he had a girlfriend, beautiful girlfriend, who introduced me to the nudist camp and so on. So he studied business here. He was a devoted communist. He loved his friends in Rostock, in the groups, what they did together, and the bicycle stuff, and so on and so on. But in a short time, he was transformed from a communist into a miserable bourgeois again. He owns today a factory of 800 people together with somebody, makes a tremendous profit, and also his personal life. So he came here, maybe a year ago, and he said he wanted to come, brings his wife, and so on. So I knew Anke, the first one, he could not bring anymore because they separated. So they lived together, and it was something like a marriage because they just had to send a postcard to the Life Statistics Office, moved in, and then when they moved out, they said moved out. There was no divorce, nothing whatsoever. So, but now they split up because he was an accountant, she was a medical doctor. As soon as the Western class system came in again, she went up in rank and he stayed down there, and it didn't work anymore. Class discrepancy was.
So that's in this side, even people know this.
Right. So when you introduce the class system,
social relationships were better and so on, but on the academic research there was.
Well, let me just finish up my thought, because the communist now is slowly transformed. So he comes, and I thought, well, he cannot bring Anke, but he had a second wife and then a child from the wife. So I thought he would bring her, but then he comes and I cannot recognize her. So there is a third one and so on. So he got all into the bourgeois business, through and through. So, but what I would like to say is, first of all, to separate the systems and then really be critical to both of them. So we do not want to be uncritical, critical to the bourgeois system and not the other one. Because even Marx, when he wrote the Communist Manifesto, there's a whole chapter where he praises the bourgeoisie and its accomplishments, because electricity, this type of building and the cars and the airplanes, it's all bourgeois. So the good things, and the tanks too, of course, the tanks, and the airplanes, and also the bombers, and so on, and the atomic bomb, and the killing of 70,000 people in one city and so on. So it's a mixed picture, as they would say, but that's not good enough. It is that each of these systems, slaveholders and so on, they have their positive accomplishments, but at the same time there is the negative which pushes history. It's not our swimming pools or so which undo that system. It's the surplus value which undoes the system. It is this fundamental injustice which will, like a cancer, will better than a cancer, it will produce a new system.
I think it's really interesting to remember historically, especially in the 20th century, that there's never been a socialist country that has had a single normal day of development.
Yeah. Right, they torpedoed it, they did their best to put an embargo on it.
Everything.
Now, it is true that the United States offered the Marshall Plan also to Russia, also to East Germany and such, but they knew that if they would accept it, the same thing would have happened which happened under Gorbachev, in Yugoslavia, in Romania and so on. After they conquered the capitalistic system and fascism and so on, then they had still now the need for primitive capital accumulation. You have to make that thing start. That was done here along the East Coast in the tenement houses and so on, Brutal, 18 hours of work, put people together in one room and so on. It's awful. So we had this, if we talk about Stalin, the Gulago and stuff, they had their own Gulago here. But it was in a private way. It was a private Gulago, But I described one family, what they went through this hell here along the East Coast. So therefore, Tito and so on, what the decision which they had to make was, should we put another generation or two, that they would eat less and produce more and so on, in order to have that primitive capital accumulation. And they said, we cannot, after 30 years of sacrifice under the bourgeoisie and the fascists and so on, the Ustascha, we cannot impose that on people. Then they went to the World Bank and took up money, and then they built these beautiful hotels, and then they were not productive enough in the hotels to pay the interest. Then they had to take up new money in order to pay the interest, and that spiraled deeper and deeper. There's one country which did not do it, and that was Romania. And there the population was so pissed off that they killed the guy, the socialist and his wife.
Okay, what you would say if sometimes really in North Dakota feel that this positive thing that remaining from communism, that the families holding together, people are good to each other and so on. This not necessarily because of communism, but because the poverty. Poverty makes people near to each other, supporting each other. Once they have money, everybody is closing his door and feels I don't need other.
Well, I don't think they have much solidarity on the north side here neither. So I think that atomization goes through the whole society and goes into the hell there of the north side here as well.
Which is poor, but still no.
Well, I mean, but you see, poor. It was not poor. It was, as you once said in the beginning, that everybody had his needs fulfilled, They all have their schools, they all have their housing, they have their apartments and so on. So, but there were no...
They had to apply for it in like 2 years ahead.
Well, I mean, the question is, when of course you have to, if you're on a kibbutz, of course you need an administration of the kibbutz somehow. So if somebody in the kibbutz, you don't own anything, you want to become a doctor, then you have to apply for it, that you can study in Paris, but you will study in Paris. And then you will come back, you will not own a car, you will not own a house or whatever, it's all the kibbutzim, but you have whatever you get. It's a completely different thing of the bourgeois thing which you have in mind, right? You have to think that the change is a personality change, it's a cultural change, it is a social change, it's a political change, and so on. But social psychology comes in too, the socialist personality is a different one. But what I showed you with this one case there with Anke and so on, how fast that can do. How fast you can change a liberal into a fascist. Or how fast you can change a fascist into a socialist, maybe, So, but it is not so difficult to change from one thing to the other. This guy, in a few years, he changed from a committed type of a Komsomol type of a guy into a totally selfish type of a capitalistic creep, So, and that is,
Trump is born as a creep.
Yeah. Okay, so, but my question is, in Brussels there, if that has something to do with the class antagonism, that these are youngsters who grow up in a working class area, that in that working class area they are not integrated adequately, that they live together in their own faith group or in their own mosque or whatever, but that the Flemish people, so Flemish or Belgium, it's a mixed thing, and they don't cooperate very well, the two there. But they are not getting along with each other, these two parts, and they may not get along with any so-called foreigners, neither, and so on. So, and then no jobs, and poverty and so on, in which, and then they hear from ISIS, from the new Islamic State, and they get a new ideology, well, let's say theology, and it lifts them up, it gives them hope, and so on. So I wonder if the class system of Belgium or of France or our class system, if that has not something to do with it. I would not say one can reduce it, and it has nothing to do with religion whatsoever. It has only something to do with class. I wouldn't say that neither, I'm rather for a multi-factor type of a thing, The class is one factor which has to be considered very seriously, who is the ruling class, in Iraq, or who was that, or in Egypt, or whatever. And it's very often, to what extent is it foreign, to what extent it's native.
Rudy, it's very interesting that if you look at those people who are going to Syria to fight, when they're coming from France, they're generally very poor. But when they're coming from Britain, they're generally middle class. But they're still going to ISIS. So, I think you're right. It's not simply a matter of poverty, a matter of class. There's also a matter of secularity. It's a secular society, you know what I mean? These are young Muslims who are maybe born to immigrants, so they don't know the other country, you know what I mean, the home country, but they're not really European.
Right.
So
it can be a multitude of things, and it can be middle class people, for whom the middle class life is hypocritical and empty and so on. That's what we have in the Frankfurt School thing. They were middle bourgeoisie, but suddenly do that island of happiness there and separate themselves from the culture of their parents. And there's a specific moment there because the Jews came from Eastern Europe, very poor, in rags, In the first generation, they collect rags and transform them into material, and they move and become factory owners, And then suddenly the sons, recognize that their good living has something to do with the workers who have to change those rags with chemistry naked, in a hot shop and so on. And then rebel against their fathers and don't want to take over the business and so on. So and so it could be, that in England or whatever, middle class people, we had it here in the 60s and 70s. These people were not working class boys and girls who rebelled here and turned the bus upside down and took the flag down up there in the administration building. They were middle class people. They were the children of the consumer power director and so on. So, but the culture which they had was hypocritical. It was not genuine. It was a lie. They lived on cost of other people's sacrifices and so on. So
When was that? When was that?
60s here, in Kalamazoo here,
There's a Dutch Moroccan psychoanalyst who talks about how the first generation Muslims into Europe suffer from homesickness. It's a really bad thing. They miss home. But the second generation suffers from schizophrenia. That they have these two personalities, two identities that simply do not reconcile with each other. They're European, but they're Muslim. But they're not really European, but they're not really Muslim. And when someone offers them the opportunity to become real, genuine Muslims and to fight for the caliphate, you know what I mean, against what clearly Europe is doing to Muslims and America is doing to Muslims, it's empowering,
This is true, because I feel really it's very easy in Europe for a Muslim to be radical, but it's difficult here.
Difficult here, right.
In Europe, you can never forget you're Muslim because the whole society shows you the hate all the time and kicking you away all the time. In Germany, at least, here it's accepting. So that's what makes these guys all the time really. When somebody says them, look, they are the enemies here.
Right. And that's the trouble with
Come
Trump.
let's fight against this. That's true. They are enemies. They're showing the enmity all the time. While in America it's different. It's not like this.
Well, I mean, if we continue the class thing, in England, you know which class you belong to. It is all in the open. Here, the class is covered up. People don't talk about it really, If I would tell to my daughters, don't marry anybody from the working class, or they wouldn't know the difference or whatever. They notice it later on, because they traveled. The working class boys didn't travel or whatever. They had this school system, and they didn't. And so I think where you have the class system so in the open, it becomes much more painful when you find yourself in the lower class there, particularly when from home maybe you were in another one, that's possible. You belong to another class and suddenly you are down there, We thought about Iraq yesterday, the butt officers, they were high in the society and so on. Then the Americans made that mistake, fired them all. They had to stand in line with other people for food stamps or whatever, This degradation is something terrible, to come from one class to another one. One of my uncles committed suicide because of this. He was in the Dresdner Bank, which is a huge bank in Frankfurt, the bank town. And so he worked for them for 30 years, and at Procura, he signed for the bank and so on. And then he made a mistake. He wanted to give his daughter a house. So he took a little something out of his business and put it in his safe and went to vacations, and somebody found it in his safe, and he was fired. They didn't even go to court or whatever. But he could not stand that. See, he was a Procura guy, the CEO, and suddenly he was out nothing. They didn't give him any certificate. He could maybe drive a taxi, and he was hiding from people. He didn't want to talk, and then was isolated. Finally went to the kitchen, closed all the holes and gassed himself. So the class is something unbelievably important, but in this society, we are not talking about that. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And therefore, somebody may buy a house here, which is not really his class. And that happened in 2008, before 2008. They sold houses to people. They looked beautiful, the houses, but they both together working could not afford that house. They were not that class with this house, or this car. The problem with our advertisement is it advertises to all classes, and then most of the classes cannot afford it. That creates, of course, resentment, and so on. So that in the slums you suddenly have an old Mercedes standing there, and you have no furniture in the house because he wants to be something, and then to have that Mercedes, old as it may be, but it makes him into something, and so all this irrational stuff has something to do with that we are not open about it.
But the capitalists find a way of getting the working class to be able to get that stuff, and they do it by cheap credit.
Yeah, and then they have debt, credit card
once
debts and all of them. You have another perversion, and then they bust in the end. Yeah.
Also, Rudy, something about, especially with Europe, is this issue of demos and ethnos that Habermas talks about. That there's still, to a certain extent in Europe, there's that identification of the demos, the people of the country, are tied with a certain ethnos. Germany is Germany because it's the land of the Germans and the Dutch and blah, 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 blah. And therefore, when you look in the U.S., for instance, there is no tie, technically at all, with demos and ethnos, right? In some minds, and that's why Trump, again, is so dangerous, because he represents those people who do think there's that tie between demos and ethnos. And yet, at the same time, for the most of us, we understand someone moves here, becomes a citizen, they're no more or less of a citizen because they came from China or wherever they came from. It just doesn't exist in that sense for enlightened Americans.
We had an experience today. We had this celebration of my 50th. That should really be analyzed, what happened there. So because I'm a German, and not only that, I bombed the hell out of them. I shot 18 bombers down, I don't know how many tanks of at least 2 of them I shot down, and so on. But I'm accepted somehow,
Right.
But because of this ethnos thing there, it's a melting pot somehow. So have I been forgiven in a certain sense? I don't even know that this is a question. I think they think I did my job. So I was a German. I did my job, I didn't commit any war crimes. It was in the very beginning already. So as an officer, after a horrible attack, where Patton did not calculate adequately, an ambush, where he lost a lot of people, and then I had to surrender because all my men were gone. But as I said today, he did not violate any jota of the Geneva Conventions and so on, And the story, I took a town away from him, Alzenau, city of Alzenau, and he had to flee fast, he had conquered it already, and he left his hospital back. And he had, in the hospital, he had Germans and Americans, and they were treated the same way. Same doctors, same medicine. That's an unbelievable accomplishment of the human species, particularly when you have been hit before.
That was in Germany?
In Germany, yeah. So when Patton, after he freed the troops there in the north, he went across the Rhine River, and that I was thrown against him. I was supposed to go to Russia, and then there were several battles, through several weeks and so. But the point which I want to make is, that in America it is not really forgiveness. I don't know really what it is. So for 50 years, they let me educate their own people, But it was already in Norfolk when I was a prisoner. There were Jewish agents, Secret Service agents, and they categorized me as anti-Nazi, anti-fascist, I had not committed any war crimes. They took people out with war crimes, and took people out with fascists and so on. And this category, under that I'm sailing, and everything's okay. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'm invited by the American Army every year to participate in their celebrations, and I tell them I was in the wrong army. Yeah. It doesn't matter. So when I don't go, they think I continue the war. But I have to go.
Well, the nation is not predicated on pre-political foundations.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's predicated on certain values, principles, and ideals.
Yeah.
And to ascribe to them makes you American. So it's the political act in and of itself that makes you an American, not the language, not the ethnicity, none of that stuff doesn't matter. And so we can say, I'm not boasting here, but we can say we know when we became American.
Yeah.
But no German knows when they became German.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Or French or whatever.
But something similar now, another word, the Slavic word. I go to Russia there, for years and years. I had a Russian student and developed nicely and so. So I never felt, in Yalta. In Yalta, there is
Right.
the other city there. What is it?
Sevastopol?
Sevastopol. Sevastopol was, flattened out. The Germans brought one gun, which they had used for Paris in the First World War, and they shot this whole place to pieces. And then I go there, and go to the university, and they know where I come from and so on, and behave unbelievably civil, without any resentment or whatever. In Yugoslavia, the Germans had taken hostages, so they were the partisans, and the partisans, blew up a train. Then the Germans went to the next town and took the whole high school out, 100 students with the teacher, and shot it. Now these are horrible things, in spite of the fact that the Germans had a rationale, partisans or whatever, to go into the next town and kill the civilians and so on. It's a horrible war crime, So one should think when I came there the first time in 1975, it was not too long after the war, after all this had happened, that they should say, well, this is one of those guys. But there is another factor here. They separate between German culture, that's Goethe, Schiller, Mozart, Beethoven, and so on, and the society, not to speak of the military or the state or whatever. And so they say this Siebert, represents this German culture, this Hegel, this idealism, this enlightenment, and so on, and forget completely about what has happened only a few years ago in this village or in this town, and so on. So there are different mechanisms at work in these different worlds, I think. But the Europeans don't have that way, I have a Dutch girl here now who helps me, The whole family have resentments that I am a German because I occupied Holland. And as a matter of fact, I was in Holland but as an occupation, but I was in the Air Force, and we used the Dutch sea there to train shooting airplanes down. That means there was a balloon up there, and then you flew by and shot the balloon down so that you could shoot the Lancaster down later on, but I had to practice that first. So I was there, but my relationship, to the people was personally friendly, but there was a hostile atmosphere, and I meet here people, from Dutch background who their countenance is falling as soon as they find out that I'm German, And I went after the war. I went with my wife to the coast and went swimming there, and I lived with the policeman, and the policeman was in the underground. And I said, I walked around there in Frankfurt, at the coast, and I had no weapons, I watched through the area, and I looked at the girls, and so on. I said, if you had met me, would you have shot me? You bet!
You bet!
I said, you are a good friend, So, but I still say, no, it was a policeman in Frankfurt. Frankfurt, God forsake, place up in the coast there. So where one could let these balloons fly,
Yeah. My grandma used to say that to me all the time, my Dutch grandma.
Yeah.
When I would say anything to her in German, she would just look at me and say, no.
Yeah, and they are so related, in terms of, they're almost the same thing, One has a little bit more archaic type of a dialect than the other one, but they're practically the same people,
To give example of the good treatment prisoner of wars, German prisoner of wars received by Americans in some
Well, I talked with the president or with somebody today in Santa Creek.
What about this huge number of women have been raped by soldiers after the war? What about Dresden and other cities that they just bombed without any reason, civilians, killing them in...
Dresden is a real
if
bad
one example is
thing,
good,
Yeah, it was totalen Krieg, right? On both sides in many ways.
Dresden is a very unbelievable type of thing. They have reconciled it now. The Queen, gave the head there of the cathedral, she gave that as a present, and so there were some things of reconciliation, but it was just absolutely madness. And the reason was Soviet Union, That means it was a signal to the Soviet Union that they could not violate the Yalta Treaty. And so the same thing was with the atomic bomb. It was not thrown anymore for the Japanese, because the emperor had already declared 2 weeks earlier, that he would surrender. So they knew very well it was in order to warn the Soviets who came through Manchuria and wanted to participate in the Japanese war in the end, and occupy half of Japan or whatever. So it had nothing to do with the Germans in Japan anymore. But whatever, it was an unbelievably, they flew into Trace 3 times. The British did, flew at night. And in the morning, an American air fleet came and bombed on top of it. So, you know what happened in Brussels, by the way, the other bomb, the biggest one which didn't blow up, was to blow up sometimes later. That means when people are all now in rescue operations, then the fire engine men and all are there, the doctors are there, and then you blow them up on top. That's what they did. So when the first attack came, then the fire engines came in and they want to rescue people, then there comes the second attack, and then the third one, and then the third, and then they flew, with these airplanes over the landscape and shot at the farmers in the kitchen and the fields and so Americans. So it was just a horrendous butchery and so irrational that one doesn't. The only rationality is, to show what they could still do.
They could have shown the Russians that.
They could have another. Of course, So there may be other motivations, but this is the historians think that this was the main rationale for this. What is
send a message to Stalin.
To send a message to Stalin, in both cases.
There's always been an aspect of American reaction in which, when face to face, you act kindly, but it was bombing is abstract. It is taken away from the people. So we dropped firebombs on all of Japan, and that was fine. But when you see them face to face, you take them in, you put them in the hospitals, you treat them well because you are dealing with them as individuals. This individual relationship as compared to the larger.
It becomes very abstract,
About this example, you mentioned that they would give this credit to people that even to let them buy things they really can't afford usually. And what's very strange thing here, they see it as negative thing if you don't have credit history.
Credit history, right.
Why do I have to make credit to be a good guy? So it's not that I can take credit for anybody that is paid. I just don't have credit history, and this is negative.
Right. And people have severe anxiety about their credit record, their credit history and whatnot.
But that's the control which they have over us,
It keeps you from complaining, because if you complain too much from your job, you lose your job, then you can't pay back your debts. And you pay back your debts, your credit history goes down, then you can't buy a house, can't buy a car, can't do anything, so you keep quiet.
But you have these control mechanisms. The Roman Catholic Church was the best controller and conditioner in the medieval world, But they were children in comparison to that. The controls come through here, the advertisement continually there, and so. And this is this credit thing, they have you under control there, step by step. They knew practically your whole life.
And they do it very strategically. I don't know if you know this, but my first year here in 1994, when I came to Western, they have Bronco Bash, the big party out there in the middle of campus or whatever. They can't do this anymore, but they used to. They would line up all the banks, all the credit card companies would line up. They'd be at Bronco Bash, and they would say, just fill out this application for this credit card, $500 limit, we'll give you a free T-shirt or a free 2 liters of pop. Okay? And we were so dumb, 18 years old, we would say, yes, of course, let me fill that all out. And then the mail, they would start coming, these cards, $1,000, $2,000 credit line. And when you're 18, you think, my God, I can go buy my new stereo, I can buy this, I can buy that. Before long, you're in so much debt, they got you at 18 years old. That is child abuse.
Yeah, it is,
But that's
and
how
it's
they did
the form of control, Okay, so we are finished with our Brussels thing. Our last thought was, to what extent this, not only now Brussels, but the whole movement and ISIS and so on, to what extent that has something to do with class now? That either, that we have working class people, that we have foreigners who are moving into this lower class and have higher aspirations and feel alienated and so on, and then ISIS becomes a way out. And then also, we said today, that what Mahatma Gandhi observed in the West was religion without sacrifice. Opium religion, says you should feel good and your sins are forgiven, but your conscience is dulled. I wonder, if when a religion comes which asks for sacrifice again. The Christianity too, you have love is somewhat painful in a certain sense. Love has, because you have to overcome your egoism, therefore it is painful. But the enlighteners say is love without pain. You can have love without pain and so on. So religious people who are genuine religious know that there must be sacrifice in order to make a religion genuine. ISIS, does not make easy for these, and they know that they will have to sacrifice maybe their lives, or their connection, or their homeland, or their friends, and so on. This sacrifice component, even to the total sacrifice of one's life, is an important element which is almost completely lost. When you see here religion, the Roman Catholicism still has this sacrifice, in the Mass every Sunday and Sundays. It's a meal and it's a sacrifice. And with the council it became more and more a meal, and then people rebelled, and so they have to balance it again. And so, but it is still very much part of it. So that makes it's maybe not so clearly understandable from outside, in spite of the fact that secular people also have their sacrifices. Think of the casualties on the streets, the people who die with their cars, with their motorcycles, with their airplanes and so on. It is not without sacrifice neither, that modern life. It's very costly in many ways, but religion without, what Gandhi saw in the West was religion without sacrifice. In London, he must have seen the bourgeois religion and so on. And there ISIS offers a religion with sacrifice. Leave your homeland, join us, and so on and so on. And while one should think that would horrify people, people don't like sacrifice, but maybe there is something religious in us which is longing for this, and there it is offered.
Well,
and there we have to think again, if it is ideology, it could be ideology, right? Like we did with socialism and so on. I think in all groups, the critical theory is ideology critique can be applied. Of course, ISIS can use that as an ideology. Maybe all what they want is the country and want to have power and want to have oil and so on and so on. It's possible. But we do have to study it, We really have to look into it. But it is possible that for people who are empty here because of secularity and have no transcendence, and there comes somebody who comes with this transcendence, even a reified one, but at the same time also this element of sacrifice, and it becomes, understandably, it becomes attractive.
Well, you can see that right in our wars in the U.S. between World War II and, say, the Iraq War. In World War II, the population was asked to sacrifice, which invested them into the war effort. And the Iraq War, we weren't asked to sacrifice anything. In fact, we were asked to do the opposite. George Bush said, go about your business, go shopping, take your kids to the malls, have a good time. Don't do anything for the war, right? And so that sacrifice aspect is what helps invest people into that thing, into that.
So the secular side has it as well, So, and I think the older generation here, the sacrifice of the Second World War seemed to be legitimate. When the Vietnam War came, it was not so clear if these sacrifices were legitimate. If these people were really sacrificed, the 58,000, for a good purpose or for a just purpose, etc. So, nevertheless, for our situation, I mean, that is, if we call them terrorists or whatever, if somebody goes there and blows himself up, and that somebody, gets rid of his belt in the last moment, it means something in him may say, I cannot make this sacrifice, it's just too much or whatever. So it is a sacrifice, and it is religious. So, and that explains, I think, the powerful issue. But that's not our concern here. Our concern is to what extent they are working class people who are in a country which is ethnically oriented. It's big split, between the two parties in Belgium. And then they fall below that level, which is not only a lack of poverty, but also a lack of respect, a lack of recognition. They are maybe African or they are Near Easterners and so on, and they feel not respected like all the other people are respected. And in spite of the fact that it's not so clear, and with poverty, you have an income, so much money, and so with respect, or disrespect, you don't know really how to quantify that, but not to be respected, I mentioned that today, I included, in that recognition, all the others, who did never find any recognition whatsoever. And we all need it. We need it like work, we need it like food, and so on. Everybody needs to be recognized. And most people get the recognition only in the obituary after they're dead, It's the only time they're on the newspaper and get some recognition. So.
You said something in the beginning that I didn't really follow. You said that one betrayed Jesus, the other one denied him 3 times,
Yeah.
and then that went through the church. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, we have these books today, you know, about crimes, the criminality of religions, and so therefore they will show, you know, that the cock was crowing 3 times or whatever is one title of a book, so that Judas' betrayal goes through the whole church history, you know. That means the popes and so on, they're all involved in the betrayal of what Jesus was taught, you know. So that is what Horkheimer means when he says, you know, he died against all those who still who appeal to him today or represent him today. And there's some truth. It's not all true, you know, because there were these little nuns here who built that hospital and built that school, and you know, there are many good religious people who do good things, collect toilet paper and so on and so on. So, but it is also true at the same time that this criminality is there, and all religions have this criminal aspect, and one should not deny it. You know, it depends that they do not follow their own teaching, you know, and that they pretend to follow their own teaching. You know, I'm a Christian too, you know, or whatever. These also Christians, you know. That is a miserable type of a thing, and so on. So, but it is widespread. Everybody has it, you know. Therefore, you cannot hypocritically say, well, they have it, but we, you know, no, we, you know, it doesn't. Even poor my God today felt it, you know, in his soul that he didn't live up to the standards, and none of us does. Nobody does, you know. And but in spite of the fact, one should not opt for opium religion, for instance. You know, that's not a good way out. In order to, one should work on that damage hypocrisy which we all have in ourselves, you know. It was an interesting thing that Kant, for instance, you know, he thought that Anselm of Canterbury was a hypocrite, because he said, you know, the idea of God includes this reality. He could never have believed that. He just pretended this stuff. So, okay, well, now let's see, we have how much time. We want to see some kind of a movie. We had a break already. You prayed for all of us, right? You prayed for all of us. Yes, you prayed for all of us.
You may do it for it.
Yeah, you can go ahead. We go ahead in the meantime. Yeah, yes, let's go ahead wherever you want to go. The house is yours, and we go on in the meantime. Okay, so we want to look about that second background reading, the second and the last one. That is this book there. So you can get it in the books in the library if you want to. I don't think it's in the bookstore, but get it in the library and take the first chapter of it. That's all, or the 32nd and 33rd one. So the last 2 one and the first one, not that in between. So what it is, it's a report about our 40 years in Dubrovnik. In the 40 years, we have somehow put that down, but that is not so interesting. Look at the first one about the critical theory, and look at the 2 at the end there. And as far as the title is concerned, we were concerned all these 40 years about the future of religion. So that means, is there a new paradigm in Islam, for instance? Is there a new paradigm in Christianity where we can move? Is there a new paradigm in Judaism? That's one way how one can put it. Or is there the possibility of a religion which is in all of us, but which is not identical with any of the historical religions? That's what Rousseau and Voltaire and the Enlightener thought about. So, nevertheless, we will discuss that in Dubrovnik this time about the future there. Then you know what these words mean there about creator, right? That so all the Abrahamic religions have the creator God. Exodus is the Moses who leads the people out of Egyptian slavery. The Son of Man is in Daniel, which you have in Islam too, I think, the Daniel prophecy, so the Son of Man coming and so on. And that is the only title which the Rabbi Jesus used for himself. And then the kingdom there, it means the Messianic realm, the coming of the Jesus Messiah, which is also in Islam, not in Judaism, of course, but also in Christianity, and so on. So that is what the book is about. And the first chapter shows how our course in Dubrovnik on the future of religion, how that came about, and how we participate in the Civil War, and all these things. So these experiences are there. And then there is one about liberal people who sacrificed their lives. Okay, then, and the other one, the depth study, you can somehow find for yourself, or you can take the same one which you had already. So if you had one guy.
There are kids over there.
No.
Yeah,
You need
these are my kids. Yeah, right. Kids are over there. Children?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. These are my grandchildren. Yeah, right. Okay, you can have one if you want to. I have 14. I should share them. No private property. No. Yes, yes. Okay, so that is clear, right? So we have our date, 6th of April to the 13th of April. Make it short. Don't have to make it long, right? So, and we will do the same thing. I give you questions, or you can choose the depth study and make it a little bit longer, right? So either or, like we had it. I don't know what you did with it, but you can do the same thing then again. Okay, now as far as the themes which you have concerned, the last time we did something very difficult, and before we have the movie there, I want to go through this and maybe some other points. We talked about the dialectical notion. Now that's very difficult and abstract, but it is the core of the critical theory and wherever it comes from. So if you take it simply logically, it means the universal, the particular, and the singular. So you have that in all sciences. Let's see, the human species, the universal, and then the different nations, the particular, and then the individuals in these nations, that is the individual. We talked about the different religions which had a Trinitarian structure. So I mentioned Taoism, for instance, I mentioned Hinduism. They all have this Trinity there. And we also, the Persian religion, and even the Germanic religions. And we said that Judaism, when they sentenced Jesus, they did not oppose him because he said he was the identified. Not that he said about the Son of God or the Son of Man or so, but that he identified himself with that. That is what they were upset. So that we had in Judaism, in late Judaism, we had beginnings of a son idea, so the beginning of a Trinitarian thing. And then even as far as Islam is concerned, an internal Quran, Holy Quran, in Allah himself, which is then externalized, it becomes outside in a visible one through Gabriel, who is the same angel who told Mary that she would have a son and so on. And so there are beginnings of this, but it is not fully developed. So we have these Trinitarian structures, and then Immanuel Kant brought this idea up on a level, again on the philosophical level, of triplicity. So he saw suddenly a pattern of three everywhere, and then with Hegel that became, completed. It was before that we have it in mysticism, in Jacob Böhme, and we have it in Eckhart and so on. So, but the Enlightenment rejected this idea of Trinity. Three cannot be one. One cannot be three. So, therefore, there is a discrepancy now between these two sides. So we have on one side this then Neoplatonism. We have this Trinity too. From Neoplatonism, it comes into Christianity. So in the New Testament, we have the idea of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, but we do not have a real system. This morning, the minister said again, we are Trinitarian, but we don't know what it means. So they have a Unitarian church over there. They have denied the Trinity. They are the real modern people. But the churches downtown are still Trinitarian. So, but how is the Trinity now visible? So in Hegel, then, we find that the logic, there is being, and there is essence, and then there is the notion. The notion is the synthesis of being and essence. So, for those from the West, there is the great proof for the existence of God. That means the highest idea must contain being too, otherwise it wouldn't be the highest idea, and therefore God is. That is the ontological proof of God. There was a monk who right away rejected it, and then Kant and the whole modernity, the whole Enlightenment, has rejected it and called them hypocrites, because they say that this exists, really God exists, but they don't really know, and therefore they only pretend it, and so on. So therefore Kant and the Enlightenment rejected all proofs of God, which means practically that as a Muslim and as a Christian and a Jew, You only have faith, and you cannot rationalize that faith through thought. That means faith means not to think. While Anselm Fenderberry says you believe in order to know, you believe in order to know. So belief and knowledge are not exclusive with each other. And we talked about Hellenization, right? That we have a de-Hellenization process. That means that the Trinitarian idea was rejected, de-Hellenization, but it has its positive side. We would not have the great revolution, natural science revolution, the 18th century. We would not have the bourgeois revolution without this de-Hellenization. We would not have multiculturalism today without this. So, but there is nevertheless a loss of this, and let me show you why now. When they apply the Trinitarian idea to the reality, to the real world, then we have it, the last time we talked about that, the threefold constitution, that we have the executive, and we have the legislative, and we have the juridical branch, and so on. They are all one. It's one state in three persons, no, in three branches, right? So you have in a secular form, you have nevertheless in the Enlightenment this triplicity coming through. Or the family. For instance, the family is marriage and it's private property, it's family property, and it's the children, education of the children. Or a civil society where you have the need system, the administration of justice, police, and professional organizations. So you have this threefold thing everywhere, also inside of our own organism. We all are this organism, but we also have this organism. So we can look at it as if it was an object, and we are it at the same time. So this organism has a form, then there is the assimilation, by seeing, theoretically, hearing, and so on, but also eating then, that is assimilation, through which the form develops, and then there is the reproduction, the sexuality, but also illnesses, aging, and death belong to this. Every organism has that, all over the universe. Little squirrels, human beings, rats, whatever. So all the organisms, as long as they exist on this, that means maybe 7, 5, 6, whatever billion years, whenever the first cell came, that cell began to eat, that cell began to reproduce, and that is, so we have the chemistry of the Big Bang all inside of us. So that is the organism, and the organism and the assimilation process, and then the reproduction, sexual reproduction process. But also in terms of our personality now, our subjectivity, that means there's an anthropological level, our gender, our race, our nationality. We have a certain national personality, and it is all very easy. That is why fascism has it so easy to say this is a Jew and this is an African and so on. Every idiot can see if you are white, green, or yellow, or whatever. So the anthropological level is relatively easy to grasp. The phenomenological level, there is phenomenological sociology, there's phenomenological psychology, and so on. There you talk with the consciousness of people, their political consciousness, their sexual consciousness, their ethical consciousness, their economic consciousness, and so on. That's harder to see. When you have a boyfriend, you talk with him, and you can see he has no political consciousness, he doesn't know who Trump is, he has no religious consciousness, he never thinks about God and the world, and so on. But he has a huge sex consciousness, and so on. So it's very well developed there, but everything else is missing. Then you know exactly what you have. So that is phenomenology. That means you trace the consciousness of a person, which is not so visible. You can only get it by talking. So when you make a questionnaire, in sociology, and you ask people, do you believe in God? How many times do you go to church? And so on. Then you slowly will see what religious consciousness that person has. And positivistic sociology can do that. In Yugoslavia, they have done it for many years, even in the communist time. So you can somehow see, do you believe in the Trinity? Do you believe in the Trinity? And so on. So positivists can do that as well. And then there's another psychological level, and that means memory, remembrance, intellect, and will power. So there, Rousseau and Voltaire, they have developed this as well. And so the will is not only a bundle of instincts, but it is rationalized. That means it contains memory in itself, and it contains reason in itself, and it contains principles in itself. For instance, politics without principles, what are the principles of this politician. They talk about that all the time. That's a matter of principle. But then the facts are this, and then there's a discrepancy between that principle, which is usually given up then because of the facts are so different and so on. So, nevertheless, our will then is the basis of all the other things. The family, or first of all, the property thing, which we just discussed tonight. So there is the what is called private right. So that's property, that is contract, and then the violation of property and contract, including rape, including killing, and so on, and then the punishment for this. That is there long before there is a civil society, long before there is a state, and so on. And then we have that what we discussed tonight, personal morality. Socrates introduced that idea. He talked about a new daimonion, which he introduced. He was sentenced because of introducing a new god. The Greeks thought that conscience was a new god, and there was a law against introducing new gods. So that was a tremendous breakthrough, and it was necessary because civil society with its chaos and so on, and its turning upside down of truth and all this, he wanted to give a new hold, a new orientation to people. And Jesus did the same thing in Jerusalem. Both were killed by the state, one by the Jewish state, the other one by the Athenian state. Both were killed by false trials. All the people who charged Socrates with that crime were sentenced later on themselves. That was the law in Greece. If you gave a false witness against somebody and had to die, you had to die later on. That was not the case in Jerusalem. So nobody died later on for the false judgment. So, by the way, this morning the minister said all kinds of wrong things. Jesus died, now it's Easter, we celebrate that this week. He died for blasphemy, right? That was the high priest who charged him in the Sanhedrin. And as far as the state is concerned, he was sentenced for high treason. So for claiming power which he didn't have or so. So they both had different charges in the trial, but both charges were false. So Jesus was not really an anti-Roman revolutionary, and he did not commit blasphemy either. So,
Rudy, we've got 10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that we have that so behind us, that we cannot really think without the notion, the universal, the particular, and the singular. And then the next time we will continue that a little bit. So what we want to do today is Schindler's List, which you have seen maybe, but we want to analyze it a little bit more. I don't know if you have seen it. Schindler's List is a movie about Schindler. Schindler was a German businessman. And when the East was, please go to the cookies there. Enjoy the cookies. So when the German army marched into Eastern Europe, then, of course, armies march for businessmen. The businessmen followed them, and they then got cheap labor in Russia and in Poland and so on, and the Jews were among that cheap labor. So that is what we will see here. So remember, we talked about liberalism, we talked about socialism, we talked about fascism, and the critical theory development has a lot to do with the fight against fascism.